everyone.
Okay,
Welcome to Baker & McKenzie. Nice to see you all. My name is Anastasia Gerasimovich. I'm a member of the Executives Club Board of Advisors and a partner in Baker & McKenzie here in Chicago, leading our global commercial construction and U.S. real estate practices. On behalf of the Executives Club and Baker & McKenzie, I'm delighted to welcome you and thank you for joining us for today's discussion featuring a stellar panel on manufacturing leaders. Speaking of leaders, I hope you've all heard the news about Exec Club's incoming president and CEO, Dory McWhorter. I'm sure we're all excited to see what Dory will bring to this amazing organization. Welcome, Dory. Before we start the program, I would like to welcome the members of the Exec Club's Board of Directors, Board of Advisors, and the members of the club in the audience. I would also like to recognize today's PSA sponsors, KPMG and Baker & McKenzie, as well as all Signature Series season sponsors. Your ongoing support is what makes exceptional programming like today's event possible. Now, turning to the substance of today's conversation. Illinois has long appeared a powerhouse in American manufacturing, home to a diverse range of industries from advanced machinery and aerospace to automotive, food production, and industrial tech. As the most international and largest law firm in the world in 45 locations, today we see deal making on the rise in the global industrial sector, and we expect investor appetite for industrial and manufacturing assets increase by 20 to 25% in 2025. The unstoppable pace of digital transformation requires companies to invest in generative AI and robotics to streamline manufacturing processes, generate savings, and achieve sustainable growth. We also expect tariff-driven protectionist policies to reshape transportation and manufacturing sector strategies on a global and national level. As the sector evolves, the voices of its leaders are more important than ever. So this afternoon's fireside chat brings together three of Illinois' most respected manufacturing executives: Duncan MacLean of MacLean-Fogg, Andrew Silvernail of International Paper, and Richard Tobin of Dover Corporation. Joining them to moderate the conversation is Jeff King, Advisory Market Leader at KPMG Chicago. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Anastasia, thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Maybe just to start, obviously this is an incredibly important topic, and to get started with it, let's start with an open question. You can kind of reflect a little bit on your career and kind of where you're going with this, but what's one defining moment or decision that has shaped how you are leading in today's manufacturing environment? Rich, you're sitting next to me. I'll let you field that first.
I guess I would learn more from the mistakes that have been made in the past rather than the things that have been successful. Primarily chasing themes too early. So to give you an example, I mean, if you look at electrification of vehicles and the amount of capital that was committed to be spent early into the process, I've been there, done that, not necessarily on EVs, but on other things, and I would say the same thing about chasing geographic exposure. There's always a hot place in the world that you have to be, and then everybody runs out at the same time and overspends in terms of the capital, and then the market turns on you and you find out that it gets overcapacitized relatively quickly, or for a variety of different reasons that the geography is not as profitable as you would have thought. And I can tell you horror stories about plants that I've built in China and Argentina and a variety of other places. So I think that's probably the most important lesson, is to have a little bit of strategic patience. You can't always do it because it depends on the market position whether you're a leader or a fast follower. But overall, I think that's probably the best learning I've gotten over the last 30 or 40 years.
Andy?
You know, for me, it would be around people. If I think back through, kind of across, life, whether it was sports, Duncan and I played football together in college.
Let's not get into those stories,
though. Well, we were roommates too. So
and we're really not going to get into those.
But I think through my career is just understanding that as Rich said, geographies change, businesses change, a lot of things change. Technology obviously changes. Tariffs come along. Crises happen. And the quality of the team that you build and the focus on teamwork, really driven around trust, has probably been the most important thing. And I've learned that lesson, to Rich, to your point, through mistakes over and over and over again, is just focus on the team. It's impossible to do anything else unless you get that right.
That's great.
Well, so just to add a little bit, I agree with everything they're saying. I would say the other key thing is don't panic. We're a 100-year-old company, a private company now, and we didn't get that way by making short-term decisions or long-term decisions based on short-term emotions. So, the best example I could probably give you is tariffs. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point today. If I woke up and changed our strategy every minute based on what's coming out of Washington, I'd probably have less hair than I do now. But you got to stick with what you're doing. And then if there was a specific decision, I would also say you can't be afraid to take risks, right? There is a point where risk taking, you never want to bet the farm, but I remember, not when I was the CEO, I was younger in the company, we bought a machine that cost $15 million with no orders. And it fundamentally changed the company. It about tripled the size of the business in that one division, and it was a risk. We had a good strategy, we believed it, we didn't let the outside influence sort of scare us into not doing it. We stuck with it, and it's been a great investment ever since. And I won't say it was all perfect, let's be very clear on that. But at the end of the day, what are we now, 15 years out, we can probably ring the bell on it and feel pretty good about it.
I like it. All right. We talked about the lessons you guys have learned and what you shared. One of the things that kind of came as you're evolving, right? You're learning from that and evolving to compete. The competition is relentless, coming after you. The markets are always changing. Mail, this is a little bit of like how you've changed strategies and evolved to compete. So maybe, Duncan, I'll keep it with you to start. Real quick, MacLean-Fogg, deep roots in Illinois. The company's evolved over the years, and how have you stayed competitive with a lot of U.S. manufacturing and given all the dynamics with globalization that have happened?
Well, it's really interesting. Rich's comments early about sort of chasing to the hot place. When I was sort of younger in the company again, we had operations all over the place. And I remember distinctly we had an acquisition that the economics were $20 million in sales, and it had operating businesses in Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, China, and Thailand. So that's 5 different countries, 5 different jurisdictions. I could tell you that we never made any money at that, right? So it was, of course, strategic and very important and all that stuff that you hear. And then when I took over as the CEO, I started cleaning up the portfolio. And my basic rule was, if we're not making money at it and we can't see a path to making money at it, the only thing we're getting out of it are airline miles, we need to move on. And you gotta recognize that globalization is real, but look at the commodities that you're selling, right? So we're selling nuts, right? I could put a box of nuts together and ship it pretty cost effectively around the world. I have competitors, and there are subsidies for steel manufacturing in certain countries and things like that that are competitive disadvantages, but in general, labor is not the critical part of my cost structure. So am I chasing labor or am I chasing access? Because I can buy access through partnerships and other things rather than putting real bricks and mortar in a place if I'm trying to chase labor. To be honest, we never had great success in China because that's not, the benefit you got out of China you just don't get with our types of products. We did have a plant that was really very successful there, but that was a access-based business, more on the electric utility side of the company. So, you got to be aware of what's happening globally, and you got to pay attention, but you can get that access other ways. Hire people, hire local people, find partners. You know what, we're lucky we're family businesses. There's a lot of other family companies, especially out in around the world. Find them, partner with them, and then use them as your local conduit rather than bricks and mortar. So that's a lot.
So Rich, I'll come to you real quick. Dover being a multi-industrial, very diverse in markets that you serve, how are you able to kind of manage these business and evolve the strategies of the different businesses given the diversity?
Look, what I'll tell you, I'm sure Andy will nod his head after running IDEX, we're more or less the same kind of structure. You have to separate running the assets themselves with managing the portfolio, and it's a little bit distinct. So we spend a lot of time running the individual businesses like the way that Duncan runs his business, right? Where's the productivity? What are we doing about pricing? Everything, the myriad of things that you need to do just to run the enterprise. But as a multi-industrial and we've got multiple companies, we need to actually turn it on its head a little bit and look at it from a portfolio management point of view, and to have the discipline to look at the companies, what is the trailing and the forward projections in terms of return on invested capital, and then stay disciplined to the process of you can't fall in love with anything. So that's why you see a little bit of a small churn in the portfolio over the time, because business cycles change. You need to determine sometimes if I reached the profitability that's possible within the individual companies. Is the technology change? So you have to evaluate it and stay to the discipline of doing it, and not get caught up in the fact of, wait, my God, we just put $30 million into that business last year. We can't pull stakes. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you believe it's going to be disadvantaged over the next 36 months or 4 to 5 years, that's when you have to pull stakes. So it's a little bit different. I mean, I've run businesses that are kind of capital goods, vertically integrated, long decision processes, big, huge billion-dollar bets when you're making changes. The beauty of a multi-industrial model, it's thousands of small bets, and it's more portfolio management. I think intellectually, I've enjoyed it quite a bit as opposed to capital goods.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, so I'm on the back side of that. I did what Rich is doing. I did it for 10 years at IDEX, and that sense of those smaller bets, more diversification, I couldn't agree with any more. But I don't think it matters what kind of business you're in. I think that people undervalue leadership. And when you really think about the power of leadership, and I've been in enough different types of businesses now to test the differential economics depending upon if you're a leader or not a leader. And so at IDEX, we absolutely learned that by understanding it's kind of the old Jack Welch, 1 or 2 are out, right? And having the discipline to do that. And I really have seen that on steroids. I've been on the board of Stryker Corporation for 12 years now. And what that team has done, what Kevin Lobo has done with just unbelievable focus of category leadership. And I don't think it matters if it's a product line or a business, whether it's capital goods or it's diversified. That sense of we are going to, even if the niche is this wide, we're going to have a leadership spot in that, because the economics play out every single time. If you're a 30% EBITDA business, or the industry is, you're 40. If it's 10, you're 20. It's just a differential economics when you have leadership. And so that discipline of I'm going to have that no matter what, or I'm getting out.
But can I play moderator for a second?
Yeah.
Andy, you didn't always think that way.
No, I didn't. No.
What changed that helped you think that way? Sorry.
Mostly getting away from you.
Okay.
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Okay.
No, in all seriousness, I think that I think you mature and you make mistakes. You go chase things. And I think, Duncan, in your business, in all seriousness, so I was on Duncan's board for a decade. And I saw you guys go through that maturation cycle of you chase growth in one way or another, but it's easy to think that you're making a bet for 12 or 24 months. The vast majority of the bets that all three of us make are decades, right? These are decade-long bets. And while Wall Street's talking about, the next quarter, Rich isn't going to go buy a business to sell it in 2 years, right? You're not a private equity shop. Chances are you want to own it indefinitely. And so that's, I think it's maturing and actually witnessing the economics, and then, as Rich said, making a bunch of mistakes, right? You go and you buy that number 4 player because you think you're going to fix it, and you're like, wow, it's a long distance from 4 to 2. It's a lot further than people think.
Yeah. All right, let's take it up a level real quick and talk a little bit about how you would describe the state of American manufacturing right now. What gives you optimism? What concerns you have? Rich, you want to take that?
Sure. We're a bit behind. I'm old enough to remember capital light and everybody dispensing of hard assets because you got paid to run businesses that didn't consume a lot of capital, and the capital markets rewarded you for it. So you see a lot of industrial companies that tried to morph themselves into software companies at a time because Wall Street rewarded it, and so you got the funding and everybody got paid and all that. But unfortunately, the industrial base of the country, to a certain extent, kind of withered away because you didn't want to be in those types of industries. So there's some catch up to do. The good news is I think the intellectual firepower and the intellectual property and the R&D resources never really left. It may have been offshored, right? So the actual processes took place offshore, but so I don't think the catch-up curve is very far, right? We've, even at Dover, have taken underinvested businesses and over, a 3 to 5 year period, just smartly employed the newest technology. And the benefit of going into a transition where you're in catch-up is you can leap forward, right? Because you're always trying to sweat your assets, and people get afraid of the D in EBITDA, so they want to keep it low. So I think we're in a good spot, all right? I think that, when you look at different countries around the world, the balance sheet of the United States is still the balance sheet of the United States. Forget the capital markets portion of it. I'm just talking about raw materials, labor availability, know-how, IP, all of that still exists. So this pivot, if we are in fact going through a pivot, I think should be highly successful.
I am very much a long-term bull on the U.S. I think when I go back and I look at my career, starting in 1994, and I look at the incredible innovations that have happened in this country, and we haven't gotten them right. But if you think about how quickly we as a country have the ability to pivot, because we're not centrally planned, right? Because it's not controlled, because we don't have the overburdened social programs. We have all of our issues, we have all the problems that we have. But on a comparative basis, we're in a pretty good spot. I look at the goofiness of what's going on right now, and it's painful and it's causing real economic problems. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how different is the world going to be from what we thought it was going to be in January? I'm not a believer that there's like some fundamental massive shift and it's all going to be different in the future. I don't fundamentally believe that, and the data doesn't support that to be true. That being said, I think we have some pretty big fundamental issues around energy policy, around how we think about education, that are fundamental, that we're not going to fix it. Us in this room aren't going to fix it, but boy, do we influence it enormously.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I think we have to do as leaders is we have to influence these things in the ways that we can, and get out of this hyperpolar world where we're letting kind of the lunatics on either side decide, the direction.
I agree with everything. I'd add a little political commentary before I give an answer. I think generally the West has exported inflation to the East. So you can think of what first it was Japan and Taiwan and then China, right? And I think the reckoning is now here that materials, whatever it is that you're buying, whether it's a consumer good or raw material, there's going to be a balancing effect. And I think that the West broadly has to sort of get over that. And then the other political commentary is I think we've made manufacturing not sexy. Okay, so when I go and watch TV at night, I'm not seeing a guy in a factory job, I'm seeing a guy at a computer, and it's all centered around service industries and whatnot. But I do agree that it's a bullish time to be investing. The tariffs are definitely piquing a lot of our customers' interest about repatriating stuff, and they're willing to pay a premium. And what that means is we're all going to pay more, let's just accept that. But I think it's going to bring jobs back. And then the issue that I'm going to have when we get some of that is whether we can get enough people. And so the governor, I think, on this is not, I agree with Rich, it's not the technology side. I agree that it's not the market side that Andy's saying. I think it's more the human side, whether we can get enough people that are excited to come to work in a factory every day. There was a great editorial in the journal, like a couple weeks ago, and it basically said, who's better off, the philosophy major that graduated and is making $40,000 a year, or the UAW line worker who just started who's making $100,000 a year, and by the way, doesn't have any college debt. And we're not talking that side of the equation up, and if we get there with that, then I don't think there's any limits on what we can do as a country. I really believe that. But we need it. Oh God, do we need it? We need to influence it, like Andy said.
Excellent, thank you. Let's shift over a little bit around technology innovation, adopting technology inside your firms, and kind of how you're innovating from within in your company. So maybe, Duncan, I'll stick with you. You've spoken publicly about the importance of technology adoption in manufacturing. What's a story or two about how that's had a big impact for your company?
Well, let me first start with a hilarious story. This is our 100th anniversary, so we're going through the archives. And I found all these old VHS tapes, and I popped one in, and it's my dad at his desk with a huge monitor. He goes, "This is exciting. I have a computer." Okay, so we've come a long way since then. Different than kind of, I'm guessing, Rich and Andy's businesses, being a smaller manufacturer, and each of our factories are a little bit more independent, and the acquisitions we might have made were from the founders or whoever, and they were smaller businesses than what these guys would go after. The systems really weren't that strong. And when I'm talking systems, it's the ability for all of you to communicate. I'm not talking about CAD, I'm talking about ERP systems, accounting systems. It's all the things that we need to put in place. And when I took over as a CEO, I put in this program, I called it One MacLean-Fogg, which is trying to unify everybody. We call it centrally led, locally executed. So this is the strategy, but what's happening in Mooresville, South Carolina, or North Carolina, you guys are in charge of that, not me. But this is what you actually have to do. So these are the platforms, and this is the technology we're using. And once we started to do that and really share and had platforms where you can share it, whether it's software or it's a system that we homegrown or something, that's when we started to see real collaboration. And frankly, it accelerated our earnings for quite a while. And it's not what you would have thought from a family business, certainly one where the previous CEO said, "I have a computer." But we got there, but it was not without small investment. And I think Wall Street might reward these guys for investing in that kind of stuff. I could tell you that a guy, my father, who didn't necessarily understand the technology piece of what we needed to do, that was a hard sell to say, "Oh, I want to spend $50 million to upgrade to J.D. Edwards." He was like, "Are you kidding me? I don't need this to work, but can you please make sure my internet's still working?" That kind of thing is an example.
Andy, let me shift over on again, technology and innovation. Sustainability is core to the markets that you serve. Just some innovation that you're driving there, and kind of how you're seeing the market for sustainable products and for you guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting world in sustainability. So fundamentally what we do, the name is International Paper, it could just as well be International Packaging. We are a packaging company, a fiber-based, a paper-based packaging company is what we do. And so, the bet on where sustainability is going around the world is a meaningful piece of the bet that we have. But really importantly, what has pivoted there is that concept of a green premium does not exist. It's just not real. There's a very, very small proportion of any kind of consumer, a business consumer or consumption from us as individuals, who are willing to pay more for something that is sustainable anywhere in the world. And so it's kind of interesting to bring, I jokingly say, bringing the tree huggers together and the raw capitalists together in this world and saying, look, folks, the problem is the exact same thing, right? It's the exact same thing. And so bridging sustainability and technology together, and I'll give you an example. So we make a sustainable product. It's a fiber-based product, right? So there are more trees in the United States today than there were 100 years ago, right? If you believe it or not. We net grow trees in the United States. People don't think of that, right? But we actually are adding more trees than we're taking away in the US. And actually it's the same in Europe too. And the reason I mention that is that if we have a fully sustainable product, but how we make it is not, right, is not. And so the ability to actually, how do you figure out how to get to truly carbon neutral while it actually driving the strategic priorities of the business, and it's not a green premium? That's the challenge. So how do you actually lower cost at getting to a net zero, or certainly a net much lower, whatever you want to pick that, is the challenge. And what's really cool is the technologies that are happening are amazing. So if you look at small footprint nuclear, it is shocking. like the things that are going to happen in the next 10 and 20 years around energy innovation. I heard the Secretary of Energy talk about this a few weeks ago. If you look at the world and you say there are 8 billion people, there are 1 billion that are rich, right? We are all, but most of the people in the United States we would define across the world as rich. We consume 13 barrels of oil equivalent a year, each one of us, right? The other 7 billion consume 3 barrels of oil a year. So what happens to total energy consumption if those 7 go to 6 barrels a year versus 3 barrels a year? It's shocking, the demand that's out there. So all the conversation we're having about energy and sustainability is in the face of a world that needs a lot more energy. And so the innovation that's happening and how we're playing in that, and then how do you actually capture carbon and do it in a way that's actually lower cost than how you manufacture today? Those technologies are in the pipeline. It's pretty exciting stuff, and that's one of the reasons I chose to come here.
Rich, I'll shift over kind of more investment strategy for new technology. So is in this environment, the uncertainty that we have, when you're looking at new advanced manufacturing technologies that you would put money behind, how is that process, or how is everything that's happening affecting that?
A variety of different ways. Several years ago, we decided to open up kind of a digital innovation center outside of Boston to kind of get near where new nascent technologies are being developed. And we put that in the kind of the bucket with our business leaders when we talk to them that you should always be putting some amount of risk capital to work. You're never going to get penalized within the group of coming up with a compelling argument that says, I'm going to get into this a little bit early. I'm not going to bet the balance sheet on it, but I'm going to try this out because, quite frankly, that's where you start hitting home runs from time to time. So it's almost the counter argument to what I said to the earlier question about chasing thematics and everything else, but I was talking about big decisions, about big counts. In terms of innovation, you need to have the people, right? These guys both discuss that, so you need to go to where the nodes are of the people that are really close to R&D centers, if you will, of the country. We dabble in amount of risk capital, so like I said, we'd like to take bets there. And then the balance of it, we're generally a fast follower, right? So they're really big companies, just by their nature, that have to chase it. We spend a lot of time doing research, like pilot shit right on it, right? So when we get belief that this seems to be working, then instead of dabbling in it, then we just double down it. So it's all thinking about playing poker to a certain extent. Every once in a while, you got to take a flyer and hope that you can bluff everybody, and that's a risk, but you're not making a huge bet on it, as opposed to, I've got a great hand, and I push my chips to mill.
Thank you. Maybe to shift over a little bit to the types of public-private partnerships that, or policy initiatives that you guys would like to see, whether it be at the state level or the federal level, that'll help support manufacturing growth. Who wants to take it first?
I'll jump in. I'm super skeptical. Just to be honest with you, I'm very, very skeptical, and I am. It's not that things can't work, and it's not that they don't work. It's that I think you have to be incredibly selective, and they have to be very, very focused. The vast majority of public-private partnerships that I have ever touched come with such bureaucracy, and they just slow everything down. And so I think as you wade into those, and you got to remember, so if you think about our business, we have about 450 sites in the U.S. and Europe. And most of the places that we are in, from a mill perspective, these are small towns. And so you are you're probably the largest employer, probably you are. And then our converting plants are our box plants where you're actually taking paper and turning it into corrugated. Those tend to be closer to metro areas, but you tend to be a very small fish in a large pond, right? So we have 4 different box plants around the Chicagoland area as an example. We're tiny comparatively, right? And so understanding where and how to do that and being very selective. And it's great to do things out of the goodness of your heart. But I think even those, they are actually very value destructive when they aren't well thought through, right? And you could find yourself in these political morass situations where you're trying to do a good thing, but everyone's got an opinion of it. And so I tend to be exceptionally narrow. It has to tie to the mission of the company. It has to tie to the economics of the company. And you have to have some level of confidence around not being caught in the bureaucracy or the politics.
Yeah, I would say that there's one example that really worked well. That was immediate or accelerated depreciation. And was that a public-private partnership in the way you're thinking about it? I don't know. It was a policy, and it was a policy that spurred a lot of investment because we could deduct it immediately. I think back when I was younger, Barry was involved with the Illinois Job Training Program. And, when you start to think of, I think if I look around the room, most of us remember going to school and there was a shop class. Okay, and, I lived in Germany for 5 years. In Germany, in high school, you take a test that basically says, okay, no, you're not going to college. We're going to start sending you to trade school. I would love to see some sort of job training program that changes the paradigm that the American dream is to go to college to get a philosophy degree, as my previous example. And instead, get some sort of credit or incentive to go to a school to learn some trade skills. Let's think welders, plumbers, whatever. In our specific business, I need tool makers. I need guys that can literally run a machine. And some of those machines are more computer focused today, sure, but there's still some base mechanical learning that needs to happen. And that's what's going to be, that would be something I think would be easy because it's basically going to employ, a good chunk of America at some point. It's not a computer coding job, but I think it's really, it's a gateway to a pretty good career if you want to really think of it that way. And I think those are, I disagree a little bit with Andy because I think that's achievable, but a politician's going to have to divert money to fund that kind of program. And are they going to have the political will to do that? Then I agree with Andy that they don't necessarily have the spine to do that. I don't know. But I'm hopeful, and we bitch about it all the time. So I'll just tell you that. See, I'm a private guy. I can say that word. These guys can't. No.
Yeah, something that shows up on the news, Duncan's like, the hell with it.
Yeah, but you're sitting next to me. I'll radiate it onto you. Sorry.
Which maybe not so much on the public-private partnership thing, but maybe on the policy side. Anything there that you'd like to see?
Well, where to take it? Let me go back to the public-private one briefly. In a past life under a past administration here in the city of Chicago, I had offered to build a plant to train tool operators.
Yes.
And everybody thought it was the greatest idea in the world. And it wasn't the biggest investment in the world. I think it was probably like 10 or 15 million bucks. And then we got wrapped up in the bureaucracy of Chicago and wore everybody out to death. And everybody wanted to put their fingers at it, and it just petered out to nothing. Yep. And we were willing to put all the capital in, have the school system bring in the teachers and teach the people to be machine tool operators, and it just died on the vine due to bureaucracy. So. In terms of policy on the other side, I'll echo again. Look, I know we're talking our own book, but accelerated depreciation is a thing.
Yeah, true.
And if you want higher levels of employment and higher skilled jobs, you've got to incentivize corporates to invest capital. that's just the way the world works to a certain extent. I won't go off on this whole tariff issue. I would just say that, Mark Rowan, who's the CEO of Apollo, who's got a much bigger balance sheet than I do, was on CNBC 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if anybody wants to hear a really lucid answer to about trade policy, I would point to there. Something needs to be done. I don't necessarily agree about how it's being executed, but the fact of the matter is something needs to be done in terms of kind of getting the playing field a little.
Yeah, thank you. Let's shift over to talent and building the workforce of tomorrow. You guys touched on that a bit there. Maybe Andy, I'll start with you because you touched on that in the very opening comments. But in terms of developing your team, what lessons, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but the lessons you learned that have proven most valuable when it comes to finding the right leaders, the right team to drive growth for you?
Yeah. It's a great question. It is the question I have spent the most time on in my career, and I do today. And that really comes down to the fact that It's the amount of change that anyone's going to go through. And if you just think about our careers, and in our careers, you walk through it, you figure long-term capital management, the internet bubble exploding, 9/11, the Great Recession, right? COVID, and now this, right? And so you kind of look at that and you say, well, those are always going to happen. They're just every 5 to 10 years, something ludicrous that we can't predict is going to happen. And so what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people who have the agility to deal with that and not deal with that just on their own. I'm looking for people who can do that very collaboratively within teams. I'm a big believer, let me back up. I am not a big believer in the star system. I do not think that the star system works very good. I think it creates incredible dysfunction within organizations. I think what you're looking for is how do you actually construct the best team? And what you want is you want people who, obviously they got to have the horsepower, they got to have the capability to do it, but do they understand what they're working on together really clearly? And at the size of the organizations that we run and many of you run, you're talking in my organization, we probably have 10,000 teams across the world. Right? If you kind of think of the average teams, about 6 people, 7 people, somewhere in there, we have about 10,000 teams. And so the power of those teams, understanding their priorities, understanding do you actually have the right people in the right seats to do the jobs, and how well do those people collaborate together. If you guys kind of think of it in those 3 elements, it's really magic when you get it right. And so it's dogged work, it is not sexy, but if you're willing to put the time in, those people will tackle those challenges. So I'll give it one quick example. If you think about what happened during COVID, or right after with the supply chain crisis and then inflation, basically nobody in this room has lived in a time where they had to manage a supply chain crisis. We have never really had one in our careers. And nobody in this room had managed inflation, right? We were all basically somewhere between teenagers and maybe in your early 20s, the last time there was any real inflation in the world. And so we don't know what the next thing's going to be that you're going to have to manage. But if you can build the teams around it who have the dexterity and the flexibility to do it, they'll figure it out.
Duncan, may I come to you here on this? You've touched on this a couple of times about developing the workforce and how important it is to find tool makers and folks. When it comes to attracting and retaining skilled workers in manufacturing, what are you doing, and what's your advice to other companies to do more of? Like what's needed?
I mean, it's a different environment, first of all. When the owner and the CEO is the same person, we show up at a factory, it's very, very different. So June is safety month for all you manufacturing guys out there. So I'm traveling, I just spent last week traveling, and it will be next week, visiting some of our plants. And you show up and you give a 20-minute town hall speech, and it's pretty boring by about the 15th or 20th one, but it's a hugely impactful for everybody else. And I just can't stress, it's not practical for Andy to go shake all 10,000 hands in a year, but I can certainly get to the 3,000 people that we have in a broad auditorium, because we don't have that many facilities. It's scale and scope is simpler. And to show up and do that, and I got a card from a woman who's an intern who she's graduating as valedictorian. Her mother works there, and she came up to me to tell me how much she loved her internship. I said, well, you're going to come to work here? She says, you bet. And why? Because I want to work for you. I mean, that's very, very compelling. And so what's happening is we're selling the brand of MacLean-Fogg, and people get engaged in that. Well, now, we don't win everybody, but I operate with a 60-30-10. 60% are going to be happy whether I show up or not. 30, I'm going to blow with the wind, and 10 are going to be perpetually pissed off. So I'm trying to manage the 30 is who I'm going for. And if I can get 1 or 2 of those to stay or to bring their family members, that's good. And then the other thing is I'm not afraid to, put people in different positions. So, maybe an example from the executive side, at the beginning of the year last year, so a year and a half ago, I took the head of our IT and I put him in charge of a P&L of 4 different businesses. So now he's not direct command and control, he's kind of managed by influence. And I took also, at the same time, I took the head of our sales for our automotive group, and I put him over a bunch of businesses. Well, one completely crashed and burned, and the other did a great job. But the person who didn't do well in that job, because I maybe didn't do a good job coaching him up, he had terrific skills, and we put him back in a role. But the point is, we tried. Okay, so we tried something, and we took someone, we developed their career, we showed some of the limitations and the strengths of it, and now he's killing it in his new role. And then conversely, we took another risk with somebody else and put him in a role where we weren't 100% sure how that was going to work out, and he's killing it. And so don't be afraid to take risks. And that can be down at the operator level. Okay, you've run this machine, but this is a much harder machine to run, but you're smart enough, let's try it. And then don't judge them by how fast you can run as an individual. If they're giving you 100%, okay, great. They're giving you their 100%, right? And then I can coach them and do that. And just one other side comment here. I try to preach a little bit, and these guys might just dispute me a little bit, but I hire more on attitude and loyalty out of anything, because I can teach you the rest, okay, or I can have somebody teach you if it's a skilled job in the factory at some point. But in the loyalty, so if you want to come to work every day and you're committed to it, I'll teach you what you need to do. And if you want the skills, I'll send you to school, or I'll do whatever you got to do to get those skills to do that. Because once I get you in the door, and it's a family company, you're going to stick around. We don't see a lot of turnover, from sort of like the supervisor level up. We see it more from the guy that comes into the really crappy job, and by Tuesday he comes in late, Wednesday he doesn't come in, Thursday we repost, Friday we hire the guy for Monday, right? That job, I can't control that job. Those are just the really crappy ones. But in general, if we get a person, we think over about 16 months, 18 months, they're going to be, 5, 10-year, 20-year person. And it's that whole family culture on it. And it's sort of the loyalty aspect to it. They're loyal to me, I'm loyal to them. Sorry. That was a long answer.
Yes, good. Rich, you have companies all over the globe. I'm going to take a global question on talent development. Strategies you deploy in the U.S. compared to the EU and Asia when it comes to developing leaders. How do you compare and contrast that?
I think you need to be a little bit culturally sensitive, and as a U.S.-based company, we do have arguments from time to time of taking whatever is the latest theory about management theory or anything else that's very U.S.-centric and peanut buttering it around the world and having accepted. I had the luxury of working all over the world, so I can get a little bit of a break on that to a certain extent. But from an operating philosophy, it's all the same. I'm willing to put up with style differences. Everybody doesn't have to be like me to work, or should they be, to work for me. So you can change your style, but we've got a philosophy of kind of an operating philosophy at Dover, the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we commute up and down, about how we run meetings and everything else. And so I try to stay very disciplined of acting that way in every meeting that I go to around the world, because like I said, as long as you're delivering performance and as long as you're adopting the philosophy that we'd like you to adopt, you can be kind of a wacky person and have a completely different style at the end of the day, but for a certain tendency. And that also goes with geographic differences, right? It's a company in India, there's certain things that have to be done in India to run it that way. It's not going to come in and say what I'm doing either by giving out meals all the time, because you need to adapt to the local environment. So I think we've got overarching philosophy that's not negotiable, but everything else can adapt to the geography.
I'm going to shift here real quick to growth a little bit and talk a little bit about inorganic growth. So the markets, you guys have all made acquisitions, I think, in the last 12 months with your companies. When you're looking at that market today, what are you seeing? What's your outlook for the next 12 months? What's holding some companies back on this? Andy, I'll start with you. I know you made a large one recently. Maybe you could touch on that and the decision-making process around M&A.
Yeah, so my whole career I've been involved in M&A, and I think it's an incredibly important part of your business. The most important thing, in my opinion, is you're acquiring for strategy. You're not acquiring for growth. The growth is a secondary thing that you're going to get from solving a strategic problem. And in a portfolio world like I was at IDEX, very similar to Rich. That can be a little bit different, because you're effectively, what you're really good at is a certain type of capability within a market, and so those businesses could be different. So in our world, and I think in your world also, you're an engineered you're solving really difficult problems that very few companies or people can solve, And so you can buy into something and that can be unique sit on its own. In the world that I'm in today, scale matters a ton, right? And so you're solving typically for supply position or market share issues or a capability that you don't have. Or in our case, the large acquisition we did was to consolidate the European marketplace that is going through a pretty rapid change, kind of 10 or 15 years behind what the U.S. has gone through. So I think M&A is an awesome place to solve problems. I also think it is probably outside of large-scale technology implementations, is the single biggest trap that people fall into, right? Deals are so freaking easy on paper, right? They're so easy on paper, and it's easy to convince yourself that the bad things that you're seeing aren't there. And everybody gets deal fever, right? They all get it, and the bankers want you to have it, and lawyers want you to have it. Sorry, Baker McKinsey,
There's a lot of bankers in the room.
Yeah,
Don't say that
sorry
too loud.
guys, but they get paid a lot of money to convince you to do really dumb things, and you just have to be enormously disciplined because not only do you not get the money back, or you don't get to spend it again, the time and the attention that go into these things when you're wrong is immense. And so it's hesitancy, it's being very focused on the problem that you're trying to solve. And then, Rich, is kind of related to what you were saying around people. Cultural fit is a big deal. It's not like we have to agree on everything. But, my wife and I, we do not go about things the same way in the world. But we value the same things and we're going to the same place. And it has to be at least that when you're doing a deal.
Yeah. Rich, you want to touch on the kind of same question?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to get fired as a CEO is to make a bad deal. It's just agree. So go into every deal with that philosophy. You're going to be prudent that you're going to push back at a variety of different forces that are there. And they're tough. Look, I mean, they're just... lots of you probably have MBAs and everything else to do that, and I do too. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but it just becomes so easy. You're going to pay 15 times earnings. If you stop for a moment and think about what that is, you're paying 15 years of earnings for something. So for you to earn above your cost of capital, whatever it is, that thing has to be a major league home run, whether it's synergy value or growth or however you want to measure it. So I get pissed off all the time with these cavalier, well, the market says you're going to pay 18. I mean, show me how that works. So anyway, not to get on a soapbox of it, but...
I'll join you on it.
But look, we do deals. We just did one a couple months, or about to close it in a couple weeks. It's an important aspect of the toolkit of overall growth, so it can't be ignored. But I would tell you that we pound away with that organic investment trumps M&A 9 times out of 10. I go back to what I said before about we're coming out of a period, whether it's 20 or 25 years, capital light, and you're going to be rewarded for not spending on organic expansion or retooling your factories. Hopefully, we're getting that's just from a return point of view, and it's asinine, right? Because if you're doing right and you're expanding the right markets, and you compare M&A success to organic success, it's not even close at the end of the day. Right now, we're coming out of a period during the free money era where M&A became prohibitively expensive, so multiples were nosebleedy, and you can see that the amount of deals that got done. We're now in a period where I think everybody's getting used to the cost of capital. I would tell you that from a value point of view, we look more in Europe now than we look in the U.S., just because the dislocation in terms of value. You need to be a believer that Europe is not forever going to be in some moribund downward cycle. We don't think that. We think there's a significant amount of technology that's Europe that's applicable to what we do. And then we buy a lot from private equity, or let's say.
and a lot of private equity. And I think I would have hoped that this was the year that there would be some monetization of those assets. It's gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. I don't know whether that's tariff related or everybody's waiting for interest rate cuts or anything else. But we'll see. So I don't think this year is going to turn out the way that everybody would have hoped it was going to turn out.
Can I add a couple?
Yeah, please.
Because I think I have a different perspective on this. We sold part of our business 2 years ago, about half of it. And what was important in that sale, or what we lost with that, was the diversification. So now we're more dependent on certain streams. So when we're out looking for acquisitions, we're looking for basically good companies. Do they have strong management in place that can stay, because we don't have a bench of people to just throw in it? Do they have market growth opportunities? Can I exceed the sort of inflationary growth? Can I grow? Instead of 2 or 3%, can I grow at 5 or 10% on that? And then are they affordable? We can't afford the 15-time multiple. And I think the one thing that both these guys said, but I just want to kind of reiterate and tease it out, you have to be disciplined. So we literally just had a deal at the finish line. I mean, we're ready to send the check. They were ready to give us the money. Everything was done. And the body language didn't feel good. So I pulled the plug on it. And you know, I can't tell you how many days since then I'm like, should I have done it? I think I should have done it. You know, should we go back and do it? And I lament the fact that I didn't do it, but I actually am kind of proud about the fact that we didn't do it. So maybe the best deal that you didn't do is the one that you did. Now, one editorial comment, because there are some bankers in the room, and I can't resist on this. The perverse structure from a banking agreement, at least if you're a private company, not a public company, is that an acquisition is immediately accretive to any debt ratios because you can add it back for 4 quarters. Where a capital investment, particularly in our business, I might invest, like we just brought a machine online that cost $15 million that I made the decision on 2 years ago. So I've been incurring the debt for 2 years, and I have really not got $1 of revenue off it yet. So I have a punitive cycle that's sort of skewed towards M&A activity. Well, okay, it is good and bad, but you got to remember, I agree 100% with Rich that a lower risk opportunity is a capital investment all day long. However, depending on how you're financing, if you're just financing on a pure cash, not a problem. But if you're borrowing some money, there is a punitive cycle for that depending on the time for implementation. And an acquisition could be immediately accretive to any debt ratios. So Andy talks about strategy. We have done acquisitions that immediately are a benefit to our debt ratios. We've done other ones where we've paid up because they were strategic and important, and then we've walked away from some that would have done all of it because it just didn't feel right. You know, so it's different. It's different when it's your own money versus somebody else's pension money or something else, I guess, right?
Thank you. No, it's not. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up real quick.
I just have to tease them.
One question for each of you to share on. Where do you see American manufacturing 5 years from now? Rich?
Look, we addressed it before. I'm like Andy and like Duncan. I think that we're bullish. I think we're going, hopefully, if we can get, listen, the problem with the election cycle, things change. But if we get the tax legislation that we want, if we get some clarity on the tariff regimes that we're going through now, like I said, we're not missing anything to move into a pivot into a manufacturing cycle. Arguably, we've got AI, and you can tell 2 sides of the story of what AI is going to do in terms of employment levels and business models. I think from a manufacturing point of view, I think it's a real big opportunity because manufacturers are the ones. Software companies will tell you that they got the data. Well, they get the data from us, right? So to the extent that you could basically bypass the ERP level and begin to recycle that data into the manufacturing process, productivity opportunity is immense.
I agree with you, Rich. Yeah.
As I said before, I'm a huge bull, but let me caveat that does not come along with massive new employment. I do not believe that in the least bit. I believe if you're 10 years from now, is the percent of the workforce larger or smaller in manufacturing? I think it's a very tough putt to say it's ever meaningfully larger. Like the idea that we're going to add 4 or 5 million jobs in manufacturing is not going to happen because the people aren't there. The people fundamentally are not, certainly in the locations that we are, the people aren't there. And so what I think you're going to see, I believe, is where Rich said in the application of technology, is you are going to see an enormous productivity boom in manufacturing that is not going to end up in major new employment because the people aren't there, the demographics aren't there. I mean, look, we're one generation behind Europe. So go look at the demographics in Europe. That's where the U.S. is heading. You can solve it to some degree with immigration, but you're an entire generation of people before you actually would have folks who are young enough now, who are going to go through the learning curve, who are going to end up in manufacturing. You're 20 or 30 years from that reality. And so what I see is a huge productivity boom, really driven by technology like AI.
So there's some great data out there about China, basically, their one-child policy and how that's creating sort of this mass retirement there. And so when you think of sort of a state-managed economy and you compare it to the greatest country in the world, not as a political statement, I'm saying free enterprise. There's no greater example of what free enterprise can do than what the United States has done. You know, having lived in Germany, my great example is I tried to start a company there. You can't start a company unless you have a business bank account, but you can't have a business bank account until you have a company. You see how the bureaucracy just stifles that. In the United States, if you want to start a company, you can do it on the web and have your business card in an hour. There's a lack of regulation. And I think the United States just in general is so innovative with how to do it because you literally can go from nothing to the CEO of the company, right? Not to throw him under the bus, but that's pretty much his life story, and I'll let him share that with you later. Okay, he's not wrong. But I mean, it's real. You can't do that in some of these meritocracy countries, or India, the caste system. Yeah, lack of it. But the caste system in some of these countries, stifle that. And then the fact of the matter is, the United States, we have a very short attention span. It's probably quarter to quarter, at least for you guys and everybody else. And at the longest, it's maybe every 2 years because there's an election cycle where everything changes. So this is going to be in the rearview mirror. We're going to be moving forward. And when you think about the innovation that can happen or has happened historically here in the United States, it's going to be awesome if you just are ready to take it and you don't miss it when it goes running by you.
Thank you, guys. Duncan, Andy, Rich, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. I think the audience did as well. Maybe for closing remarks, my friend Rob Clary from Baker McKenzie.
Thank you so much. I'll be brief. First, on behalf of Baker McKenzie, thank you for being here. Thanks to the Executives Club of Chicago. Thanks to Rich, Andy, and Duncan for your leadership. I think one thing we can take away is this country, the state, is well-positioned in manufacturing with your leadership. So appreciate your time today. I'd also like to thank KPMG, my good friend Jeff King, for their leadership support of the Executives Club of Chicago. So the most important thing I'll say is the reception is occurring right after this, right now. And we'd like to continue the conversation with each of you. So if you leave here to your right, we can do that. So thank you again. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. All right.